My husband Mark was a master of grand gestures. For our 10th anniversary, he stood before 100 of our closest friends and family in the home I had meticulously designed and raised a glass of champagne. His voice, smooth and confident, filled the room. "To Chloe," he said, his eyes locking with mine. "My rock, my partner, the brilliant mind that keeps our world turning. I'd be nothing without her." Everyone cheered as he clasped a stunning diamond necklace around my neck. It felt like a fairy tale. But just an hour later, I would be standing in his home office staring at a stack of papers that proved his beautiful words were nothing but the script for the final act of my destruction. And the co-author of my ruin? The one person I believed would protect me from any harm in the world, my own sister. If you had to describe me in one word, it would be planner. My life was a series of carefully constructed blueprints. I had a binder for everything. Our 5-year financial plan, our retirement portfolio, even our vacation itineraries were mapped out with color-coded tabs. I wasn't rigid or boring. I was secure. I found peace in order, in knowing that every brick of our life was placed with intention and care. I met Mark in my final year of business school. He was the opposite of a blueprint. He was a whirlwind, a charismatic, ambitious dreamer who could sell ice to an Eskimo. He had a vision for a tech startup that he claimed would revolutionize data management. I was captivated by his energy, his unshakable self-belief. He told me I grounded him, that my structured mind was the perfect complement to his creative chaos. We were, in his words, the perfect partnership. And for 10 years, it felt like we were. I took a stable, high-paying job as a financial controller for a large corporation, providing us with the steady income and benefits, while he poured everything into his company, Innovatech. I managed our finances with precision. I negotiated the mortgage on our beautiful suburban home, a modern glass and wood structure I'd spent years sketching in notebooks. I handled the investments that were supposed to secure our future. I was the chief financial officer of our family, and I was damn good at it. Mark, on the other hand, was the CEO. He was the face of our life, charming, sociable, always networking. Our friends adored him. My family adored him. He had this way of making everyone feel like they were the most important person in the room. His business was a roller coaster of highs and lows, a reality of the startup world. There were months when money was tight, when a big contract fell through, and I'd see the flicker of panic in his eyes. But I was his rock. I'd sit him down at our polished oak dining table, open my spreadsheets, and show him the path forward. "We can pull from the emergency fund here," I'd say, my voice calm. "We can cut back on these expenses for a few months. We'll be fine, Mark. We're a team." He would sigh with relief, pull me into his arms, and whisper how he couldn't do any of this without me. My younger sister, Jessica, was my shadow, my confidant, my other half. We were only 2 years apart, but in many ways I had always been the more maternal figure. Our parents were loving but emotionally distant, so we'd clung to each other. I helped her with her homework, gave her dating advice, and co-signed the lease on her first apartment. When she struggled to find a stable job after college, I convinced Mark to hire her as an administrative assistant at Innovatech. It seemed like the perfect solution. She needed the work, and Mark needed someone he could trust. Jessica was at our house constantly. She'd come over for dinner 3 times a week, bringing gossip and laughter. She revered Mark. "He's a genius, Chloe," she'd often say, watching him work the room at a social gathering. "You're so lucky. He's going to be the next Steve Jobs, I swear." Sometimes, when I'd express a flicker of concern about a risky investment Mark wanted to make, she would be the first to defend him. "Oh, come on, sis. You've got to let him take some risks. That's how you get big rewards. Stop being such a control freak." I'd usually laugh it off, figuring she was right. Maybe I was too cautious. Maybe I needed to have more faith. The first hint of a crack in our perfect foundation appeared about a month before the anniversary party. I was sorting the mail, a mundane Tuesday ritual, and came across a thick envelope from a commercial lending institution I'd never heard of. Sterling Financial Group. It was addressed to Mark, but it looked official, heavy. He walked in as I was studying it, a strange, tense smile on his face. "Junk mail," he said, a little too quickly, plucking it from my hand. "They're always trying to get startups to take on more debt." "It looks important," I said, my brow furrowed. "Are you thinking of getting more funding?" He waved a dismissive hand, already walking toward his office. "Just exploring options, honey. The big Singapore deal is on the horizon. Need to look prepared. It's all just business strategy. Nothing for you to worry your pretty little head about." The comment stung. My pretty little head? I was the one who had spent nights poring over our finances to make sure his business stayed afloat. But I let it go. He was under a lot of pressure with the Singapore deal. A massive company-making contract he'd been chasing for over a year. I told myself his condescension was just a symptom of his stress. "Trust him," a voice in my head. A voice that sounded suspiciously like my sister's whispered, "He knows what he's doing." The second hint came a week later. Jessica came over for dinner, looking flustered. She was unusually quiet, picking at her food. "Everything okay, Jess?" I asked, passing her the salad bowl. She jumped, startled. "Oh, yeah, fine, just a long day at work. Mark had me running all over town, getting documents notarized. Super boring stuff." She forced a bright smile. "Anyway, tell me about the party planning. Have you decided on the caterer yet?" She deftly changed the subject, and I, absorbed in the minutiae of planning the perfect 10th anniversary celebration, didn't press further. A notary. Documents. It was all just business. The white noise of Mark's ambitious career. I focused instead on the tangible things I could control. The floral arrangements, the seating chart, the playlist that would tell the story of our 10 years together. I was building a monument to our success, to our perfect partnership. I had no idea I was actually just decorating the stage for my own public execution. The night of the party was perfect. It was a cool, clear evening in early October, and the house glowed with soft lighting. Our backyard, with its sprawling deck and fire pit, was filled with the murmur of happy conversations and the clinking of glasses. I had on a sapphire blue dress that matched the necklace Mark would later give me. I felt beautiful, proud. This was the life I had built. I floated through the crowd, a perfect hostess, accepting compliments on the food, the decor, our home. "You two are the ultimate power couple," a friend from college told me, giving me a hug. "Seriously, Chloe, you're an inspiration." Mark was in his element. He moved through the party like a politician, shaking hands, laughing at jokes, his arm always finding its way around my waist, pulling me in to show me off. He was performing, and his audience was captivated. Even I was. When it was time for the speeches, a hush fell over the crowd. Our best man, Kevin, gave a funny, heartfelt toast. My sister Jessica went next. She stood up, looking lovely in a pale pink dress, and raised her glass. "I've had a front row seat to Chloe and Mark's love story for the past 10 years, she began, her voice thick with emotion. "And I've never seen two people more dedicated to each other. Mark, you're not just a brother-in-law to me. You're a true brother. You've taken such good care of my sister." Her eyes met mine across the lawn, and they were filled with tears. "And Chloe, you're my inspiration. You're the strongest, smartest person I know. You deserve all the happiness in the world." She was crying openly now, and I felt my own eyes well up. It was so sweet, so sincere. Or so I thought. Then it was Mark's turn. He took the makeshift stage we'd set up on the deck. He looked devastatingly handsome in his tailored suit. He spoke of the day we met, of the challenges we'd overcome, and then he delivered the line that would later echo in my mind as the cruelest form of mockery. "They say that behind every great man is a great woman," he said, his voice ringing with sincerity. "But that's not true for us. Chloe isn't behind me. She's beside me. She's the architect of our life. I just live in the beautiful world she's built." He then presented me with the necklace, its diamonds glittering under the party lights. As he fastened the clasp, he whispered in my ear, "This is just the beginning, my love. After the Singapore deal closes, I'll buy you a private island." I laughed, a full, happy sound. It was all so perfect. Too perfect. The perfect illusion began to crumble about an hour later. I was talking to my aunt near the bar when I saw Dave Miller, an old colleague of Mark's from his early startup days. Dave was a nice guy, but had a reputation for enjoying an open bar a little too much. He cornered Mark by the fire pit, sloshing his whiskey in a lowball glass. I couldn't hear their entire conversation, but I saw Dave clap Mark hard on the back, his voice carrying across the lawn in a boisterous, drunken boom. "To Mark, the ultimate gambler," Dave slurred, raising his glass. "I heard about the Singapore project, buddy. Taking out a second mortgage, draining the savings, leveraging everything on one deal. You've got more guts than any man I know. Here's to hoping it pays off." The words hit me like a physical blow. Second mortgage? Draining the savings? It had to be a drunken mistake. Dave was known for exaggeration. I knew our finances down to the last cent. Our mortgage was on a steady automated payment. Our savings and investment accounts were healthy, growing. I would know if hundreds of thousands of dollars had been moved. I was the financial controller. Nothing got past me. I excused myself from my aunt and walked over to them, a tight, polite smile fixed on my face. "Dave," I said smoothly, "sounds like you've been letting Mark tell you some of his tall tales." Dave grinned, oblivious. "Tall tales? Chloe, your husband is a legend. Betting the farm like that? It's epic." Mark's face was a mask of strained nonchalance. He wrapped an arm around me. "Dave, you're embarrassing me in front of my beautiful wife. You know how she worries." He steered me away toward the house. "Don't listen to him, honey. He's drunk." But I couldn't shake it. The casual, confident way Dave had said it. The flicker of pure panic I saw in Mark's eyes before he masked it. When we were inside, in the relative quiet of the hallway, I stopped him. "Mark, what was he talking about?" My voice was low but firm. He sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "Chloe, it's nothing. You know how these business guys talk. It's all bravado. He doesn't know the details." "Then tell me the details," I insisted. "Is there a second mortgage on our house?" "No, of course not," he said, but he wouldn't look at me. He was looking just over my shoulder at something in the living room. His jaw was clenched. "Have you been taking money out of our savings?" "I've been reallocating assets," he said carefully, "for the business. It's a temporary investment, Chloe, a bridge loan basically, until the Singapore funding comes through. I was going to tell you all about it after the party. I didn't want you to worry. It was meant to be a surprise, a huge win for us." His words were smooth, practiced. He was trying to manage me, to handle the situation. But the trust I had in him, the bedrock of our 10-year partnership, was fracturing. And then I followed his gaze. He was looking at my sister. Jessica was standing by the fireplace, pretending to be engrossed in a conversation, but her posture was rigid. She was watching us, and on her face was an expression of pure, unadulterated terror. She saw me looking, and her eyes widened before she quickly turned away, her movements jerky and unnatural. And in that split second, I knew. She knew. Whatever Mark was hiding, Jessica knew about it. The memory of her at dinner, talking about notarizing documents, flashed in my mind. The pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture so ugly I couldn't bear to look at it. My heart, which had been hammering, suddenly felt cold and heavy in my chest. "I need some air," I mumbled, pulling away from Mark. "Chloe, wait," he started, reaching for me, but I was already moving, walking through the party like a ghost. I needed to know. Not later. Not after the party. Now. The celebration, the music, the laughter, it all faded into a dull roar. There was only one place I could find the truth. His office. Mark's home office was my least favorite room in the house. While the rest of our home was open, airy, and filled with light, his office was dark and imposing. Mahogany bookshelves, a heavy leather chair, and a massive desk that seemed to command the space. He called it his command center. It was the one room I hadn't designed, and the one place I rarely entered. He valued his privacy, he'd said. It was where he did his best work. I slipped away from the party, my movements quiet and deliberate. I felt a strange sense of calm descend over me, the kind that comes in the eye of a storm. My mind was sharp, focused. No more emotion, just facts. I needed facts. The office door was, as always, closed. I turned the knob. Locked. Of course, he always locked it when we had guests over. I stood there for a moment, my mind racing. A key! There had to be a spare key. I checked the top of the doorframe, a classic hiding spot. Nothing. I went to the small kitchen we had in the basement, where we kept a bowl of miscellaneous keys. I sifted through them, my fingers clumsy. None of them looked right. Panic began to bubble up, hot and acidic. I was so close. I couldn't be stopped by a simple lock. Then I remembered. His briefcase. He never went anywhere without it. A sleek, black leather briefcase with a 3-digit combination lock. He'd left it on the floor by his desk. If the documents I needed to see were anywhere, they'd be in there. I went back upstairs and paused at the doorway, listening to the sounds of the party. Mark was laughing, a loud, forced sound. He was putting on a show, buying time. I had to be quick. I remembered a time, years ago, when I'd asked him for the combination. He'd been cagey at first. A magician never reveals his secrets, he'd joked. But I'd pressed him, half joking myself. What if there's an emergency? What if I need to get something for you? He had finally relented, a fond smile on his face. Fine. It's the day we met. 814, August 14th. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the small dials. 8, 1, 4. I heard a soft click. The latches sprang open. I took a deep breath and opened the lid. The briefcase wasn't filled with contracts or presentations for the Singapore deal. It was filled with manila folders, organized, labeled. My blood ran cold. This was my system, my color-coded, neatly labeled system. He had used my own methods against me. I pulled out the first folder. The label read, Mortgage, Refinance. The air in the office was thick and silent. The only sound was the frantic thumping of my own heart and the distant, muffled beat of the party music from downstairs. I opened the Refinance folder. Inside was a loan agreement from Sterling Financial Group, the company from the mysterious envelope. It was a second mortgage application for $500,000 against our home. The home I had poured my soul into. My eyes scanned the document, my brain struggling to process the information. The terms were predatory, the interest rate astronomical. It was a loan of last resort, the kind of financing a desperate, failing business would take on. And then I saw it, at the bottom of the last page, on the signature line next to my printed name. My signature. Except it wasn't. It was a forgery. A very, very good one. He had practiced. He had studied my signature for years, on checks, on legal documents, on birthday cards. He knew it intimately, but it was just a fraction off. The loop on the C was too tight, the tail of the E too long. A stranger might not have noticed, but I knew. I knew as surely as I knew my own name that I had not signed this paper. My breath hitched. This was a crime. This wasn't just a bad business decision. This was fraud. I dropped the folder on the desk and reached for the next one, labeled Family Asset Accounts. Inside were bank statements from our joint savings account, our investment portfolio, our retirement funds. All of them. Page after page showed systematic withdrawals over the last 6 months. Large sums. $50,000 here, $75,000 there. Transferred to an account I didn't recognize, an account for Innovatech. He had been draining us dry. Our future, the one I had so carefully planned and nurtured, was gone. The numbers on the final statements were gut-wrenching. Our savings account, which should have held over $200,000, now held $87.14. Our investment portfolio was liquidated. Our retirement was pillaged. A wave of nausea washed over me. I gripped the edge of the desk to steady myself. He hadn't just reallocated assets. He had stolen from us. From me. There was one last folder at the bottom of the briefcase. It was thicker than the others. The label was simple. Innovatech Restructure. My hands were numb as I opened it. It was filled with dense legal jargon, corporate filings, and resolutions. It took me a moment with my financial background to understand what I was looking at. He hadn't just taken our money to prop up his failing business. He had done something far more sinister. He had orchestrated a corporate restructure. He had systematically transferred all of Innovatech's substantial debts, supplier invoices, commercial loans, tax liabilities, into a newly created shell corporation. He had then resigned as the director of that shell corporation and appointed a new one. The final document was a signed resolution, making the transfer of directorship official. I read the name of the new director, the person who was now legally responsible for hundreds of thousands of dollars in corporate debt. Chloe Davis. Me. He had not only stolen our nest egg, he had made me the sole bearer of his company's failure. He had strapped his sinking ship to my back while he prepared to jump into a lifeboat. The room began to spin. This was a betrayal so profound, so complete, that I couldn't comprehend it. It was financial ruin, meticulously planned and executed with cold, calculating precision. And then I saw the final page, the witness attestation for the directorship transfer, the document that made it all legally binding. It required the signature of a witness, someone who could attest that I had willingly signed the documents. And there it was, a familiar, flowing signature I had seen a million times on birthday cards and letters. Jessica Riley, my sister. The sound that escaped my lips was not a word. It was a raw, guttural noise of pure agony. It wasn't just my husband, it was them. Both of them. They had worked together. My sister, my best friend, the person I had helped and supported her entire life, had held the pen while my husband signed away my future. Her tearful speech at the party, her words about how much she loved me, how I was her inspiration. It was all a performance. A sick, twisted lie. The shock receded, replaced by something else. A chilling, crystalline rage. The grief would come later. The tears would come later. Right now, there was only ice in my veins. I carefully stacked the documents back together. I took the most damning pages, the forged mortgage, the final bank statement showing a zero balance, and the directorship transfer with my sister's signature. I walked out of the office, leaving the door wide open. I walked through the house, my steps steady, my focus absolute. The party noise was just a buzz now. I was walking onto a stage, and the performance was over. I stepped out onto the deck. The band had just finished a lively song, and in the momentary lull, all eyes turned to me. I must have been a sight, my face pale, my eyes burning, holding a sheaf of papers in my trembling hand. Mark saw me first. The color drained from his face. He started toward me, his hands up in a placating gesture. "Chloe, honey, let's not do this here." "Do what, Mark?" I asked, my voice ringing out in the sudden silence, clearer and stronger than I thought possible. "Not tell the truth? I think we're long past that." I walked to the center of the deck, to the very spot where he had toasted me an hour earlier. I held up the first paper. "I'd like to propose a toast of my own," I announced. The crowd murmured, confused. Jessica, standing near the back, looked like she was about to faint. "This is my real anniversary gift. It's a loan document for a second mortgage on our house, for $500,000. A collective gasp went through the crowd. "The thing is," I continued, my voice gaining strength, "I've never seen it before, but it has my signature on it. A very skilled forgery, I have to admit." I let that hang in the air for a moment before holding up the next page. "And this is a bank statement for the savings account I've been contributing to for 10 years. Our future, our retirement. As of last Tuesday, it contains $87. The murmurs grew louder, turning to shocked whispers. People were looking at Mark, their expressions shifting from admiration to confusion and dawning horror. "You see, my husband, the genius entrepreneur, hasn't been funding his business with investor money. He's been funding it with my money, our money. And when that ran out, he decided to take on massive debt. Only he did it in my name." I held up the final document, the crescendo. "This is the masterstroke. A document that makes me the director of a shell company that holds all of his business's debt. He didn't just empty our accounts. He made me legally responsible for his failure." I locked eyes with Mark. The charming facade had completely crumbled. He was just a man, pale and sweating under the party lights. "But a document this important needs a witness," I said, my voice dropping. I turned my head slowly and looked directly at my sister. She flinched as if I had struck her. Someone to verify that I signed it willingly. Someone you trust. Someone perhaps like your own sister. I held the paper out. Isn't that your signature, Jessica? The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavy, suffocating. Jessica just stood there, tears streaming down her face, shaking her head in a silent, pathetic plea. I didn't need an answer. Everyone in that yard knew the truth. The story was written on their faces. I let the papers fall from my hand. They fluttered to the deck like dead leaves. "Get out," I said, my voice low and dangerous. I was looking at Mark, but the command was for both of them. "Get out of my house." The party ended not with a bang, but with a slow, agonizing bleed. Our friends and family averted their eyes, murmuring apologies as they collected their coats and purses, eager to escape the toxic fallout. They were embarrassed for me, horrified by what they'd witnessed. No one knew what to say. A few people, my closest friends, tried to hug me, but I was rigid, a statue of ice. I couldn't be touched. Mark and Jessica were the last to leave. Mark tried to approach me, his voice a desperate whisper. "Chloe, please. We can talk about this. It's not what it looks like." "It's exactly what it looks like," I said without looking at him. "You're a thief and a coward. And you," I finally turned to Jessica, who was sobbing uncontrollably, "you are nothing to me." I watched them leave together, getting into Jessica's car. The image of them driving off into the night, partners in my destruction, was seared into my brain. When the last car pulled away, I was left alone in the beautiful house that was no longer mine, surrounded by the wreckage of a party and a life. I walked through the rooms, collecting half-empty glasses and plates of uneaten food, my movements mechanical. I didn't cry. I couldn't. The betrayal was too vast, too deep for tears. It was a black hole inside my chest, sucking all the light and air out of me. I spent the night on the couch, fully dressed, with the diamond necklace still cold against my skin. I didn't sleep. I just stared into the darkness, the events of the night replaying in a torturous loop. Every kind word Mark had ever said, every loving gesture, every moment of support for my sister. It was all recontextualized, twisted into something ugly and manipulative. My entire reality had been a lie. I wasn't a partner. I was a mark. I wasn't a beloved older sister. I was a safety net to be cut when it was no longer convenient. The sun rose on what I came to think of as day zero, the first day of my new, terrifying life. The first thing I did was take off the necklace. I held it in my hand, the diamonds feeling like shards of glass. I walked to the kitchen, opened the trash can, and dropped it in without a second thought. The second thing I did was call a lawyer. I didn't search for a divorce lawyer. I searched for the meanest, most successful financial fraud attorney in the state. I found her on the third try. Her name was Eleanor Vance. Her website bio said she specialized in complex financial dissolution and corporate malfeasance. Her tagline was, "Justice by the numbers." I got her on her cell phone at 7 a.m. on a Sunday morning. My voice was flat, devoid of emotion as I recited the facts. "My husband has committed bank fraud, forgery, and has fraudulently transferred corporate debt into my name. His accomplice was my sister. I have documentary evidence." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Mr. Davis is your husband?" Eleanor asked, her voice sharp and professional.
"Mark Davis of Innovatech?" "Yes," I said, surprised she knew his name. "I've been following his company," she said. "He's been shopping for bankruptcy lawyers for the last 2 months. He was planning to declare bankruptcy the day after the Singapore deal officially fell through, which, according to my sources, was last Friday. He was going to leave you holding the bag. You need to come to my office tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., and do not speak to your husband or your sister. Do not answer their calls. Do not respond to their texts. Understand?" "I understand," I said. The call ended, and for the first time, a single tear traced a path down my cheek. Not of sadness, of validation. I wasn't crazy. This was real. And the fight had just begun. 7.
Eleanor Vance's office was like her. Sleek, modern, and intimidating. She was a woman in her late 50s with sharp gray eyes and an impeccably tailored suit. She didn't offer condolences or sympathy. She offered strategy. "Tell me everything," she said. And for the next 3 hours, I did. I laid out the documents on her vast glass conference table. I walked her through my 10 years of financial planning and his 6 months of systematic destruction. She listened without interruption, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she steepled her fingers and looked at me. "Good. You're organized, you're smart, you haven't let emotion cloud the facts. That will serve you well." "What happens now?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Now we go to war," she said, a grim smile touching her lips. "First, we file for divorce. Simultaneously, we file a civil suit against your husband for fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and a number of other things. We will also file a suit against your sister for conspiracy to commit fraud." My stomach churned at the thought of suing Jessica, but Eleanor was relentless. She was not a passive observer, Chloe. She was an active participant. Her signature as a notary and a witness gave his fraud the veneer of legitimacy. She is culpable. We have to treat her as such. Eleanor continued, her voice crisp and commanding. "Next, and most importantly, we file for an immediate ex parte injunction to freeze all assets, his personal accounts, the business accounts, everything. We need to stop him from moving any more money. We'll also file a TRO, a temporary restraining order, to keep him out of the marital home. He made his bed, he doesn't get to sleep in it." Over the next week, my life became a blur of legal paperwork. I spent hours with a forensic accountant Eleanor hired, a quiet, meticulous man named Mr. Chen. Together, we traced every dollar Mark had stolen. We uncovered things even I hadn't found: secret credit cards, cash withdrawals, payments to consultants for a Singapore deal that Mr. Chen suspected never truly existed. It was a ghost, a fiction Mark had created to justify his theft. The injunction was granted. The assets were frozen. Mark was served with divorce papers and the restraining order at Jessica's apartment where he had been staying. The reaction was swift. His lawyer, a slick corporate bulldog, filed a motion to have the asset freeze lifted, claiming it was a vindictive action by a scorned wife that was crippling his client's business. My phone buzzed incessantly with calls and texts from both of them. I followed Eleanor's orders and ignored them, but they started leaving voicemails. Mark's were a cocktail of rage and feigned remorse. "Chloe, you're destroying my company. You're destroying our future. This is a misunderstanding. Just talk to me," he'd plead in one message. "In the who you're messing with. You'll regret this." Jessica's were just pathetic, sobbing, incoherent messages. "Chloe, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. He told me it was just paperwork to help the company. I never meant to hurt you. Please, you're my sister." I deleted every single one without listening to the end. Sister. She had forfeited that title when she picked up that pen. The first time we came face to face again was at the preliminary hearing for the asset freeze. I walked into the courtroom with Eleanor, my head held high, though my insides felt like a tangled mess of knots. Mark and Jessica were sitting at the opposing table. Mark looked haggard, his charm replaced by a bitter scowl. Jessica looked like a ghost. She had lost weight and her eyes were red and swollen. She wouldn't look at me. Mark's lawyer argued passionately that his business would collapse. Eleanor calmly presented the evidence of fraud, the forged signature, the drained accounts. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Judge Atherley, listened patiently. She looked at the evidence, then at Mark. "Mr. Davis," she said, her voice dripping with disdain, "it seems to me your business already has collapsed. You were just trying to make your wife pay for the funeral. The asset freeze remains in place. I'm also assigning a receiver to take control of Innovatech to assess what, if anything, is left to salvage." I watched the blood drain from Mark's face. He had lost control. For a man like him, that was a fate worse than death. As we walked out of the courtroom, he shot me a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. It was a look that promised this was far from over. The months that followed were a grueling war of attrition. The legal process is not a swift sword of justice. It's a slow, grinding machine designed to wear you down. Mark, through his lawyers, fought us on everything. He claimed the money he took was a legitimate business loan that I had verbally agreed to. He claimed the directorship transfer was a clerical error. He claimed my signature wasn't a forgery, that I had signed the document and was now suffering from repressed memory due to emotional distress. His strategy was clear: bury me in paperwork, drain my resources, and break my will. But he underestimated two things: my stamina and Eleanor Vance's ruthlessness. We entered the discovery phase, and it was ugly. We had the right to depose him, to question him under oath. I sat in a conference room for 8 straight hours, listening as Eleanor dismantled him piece by piece. "Mr. Davis," she began, her voice deceptively gentle, "you claim your wife verbally agreed to lend you over $800,000 of your marital assets. Is that correct?" "Yes," Mark said, trying to project confidence. "She always supported the business." And yet, there is not a single email, a single text message, a single piece of correspondence to corroborate this verbal agreement, for a sum approaching $1 million. "We didn't operate that way," he said, shifting in his chair. "We trusted each other." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Clearly." She then produced the forged mortgage document. "Is this your wife's signature?" "To the best of my knowledge, yes." "Did you see her sign it?" He hesitated. I believe so." "You believe so? Mr. Davis, a man is taking out a $500,000 loan against his home, and you only believe you saw your wife sign it. Where were you when this document was signed?" He started to sweat. I don't recall the exact circumstances." It went on like this for hours. His lies became more convoluted, his story more implausible. By the end of the day, he was a shell of the confident man who had charmed a room full of people. Next was Jessica's deposition. It was even more pathetic. She cried through most of it. Her defense was that she was just following Mark's instructions, that she didn't understand what the documents meant. "Miss Riley," Eleanor said, her voice sharp, "you have a business degree. You have worked as an administrative professional for 5 years. Are you telling this court that you notarized and witnessed a document transferring directorship of a corporation without reading it?" "Mark told me it was just a formality," she whimpered. "He told you," Eleanor repeated. "Did you ask your sister, the director named in the document, if she was aware of this formality? The sister you claim to love?" Jessica just sobbed. "I made a mistake." "You didn't make a mistake, Miss Riley," Eleanor said, voice like ice. "You made a choice. You chose him over her. While the legal battle raged, my personal life was in ruins. I had to sell the house. It was a painful, gut-wrenching decision. The receiver for Innovatech had determined the company was insolvent, with debts far exceeding its assets. The second mortgage from Sterling Financial was a ticking time bomb. Selling was the only way to pay it off and avoid foreclosure, protecting what little was left of my credit. I watched as another family moved into the home I had designed, the home where I had hosted my own humiliation. I moved into a small, sterile apartment downtown. The silence was deafening. My friends tried to rally around me, bringing me food, inviting me out, but I was a ghost at their table. The betrayal had planted a deep seed of distrust in me. I looked at everyone, even my closest friends, and wondered what they were capable of. The world felt like a dangerous, unpredictable place. The financial toll was immense. My legal fees were astronomical. I had lost my life savings. I was starting from zero at 35 years old. But the emotional toll was worse. I had nightmares. I had anxiety attacks in the grocery store. I had lost my husband and my sister in one fell swoop. I was an orphan of my own life. After nearly 2 years of legal wrangling, Mark's lawyers finally waved the white flag. Eleanor's relentless discovery process had uncovered undeniable proof that the Singapore deal was a complete fabrication, a sham he had created to defraud not only me, but other potential investors. He was facing not just civil ruin, but potential criminal charges. They offered to settle. We met on the courthouse steps just before the final trial was set to begin. The settlement was a victory of sorts. Mark agreed to the divorce on grounds of fraud. He relinquished all claims to any marital property, of which there was none left. He agreed to a judgment against him for the full amount he had stolen, though Eleanor warned me I'd be lucky to ever see a dime of it. He was financially ruined. Most importantly, he signed a statement admitting that the debts of Innovatech were his alone and that the transfer of directorship was fraudulent, releasing me from all liability. Jessica also settled. She agreed to pay a small sum, all she had, and signed a legally binding document barring her from ever contacting me again. There was no triumphant courtroom scene, no gavel banging in my favour. It was just a quiet signing of papers in a sterile conference room. When it was over, I walked out into the sunlight and felt nothing. I had won, but I felt empty. The justice of the courts could not heal the wound of the heart. That healing had to come from me. The months after the settlement were the hardest. The legal battle had given me a purpose, a fight to focus on. Now there was just silence. And in that silence, I had to face the wreckage. I started small. I was still working at my corporate job, but my heart wasn't in it. It felt like part of my old fraudulent life. One day, I quit. It was a terrifying, impulsive decision for a planner like me. I took a part-time job as a bookkeeper for a small, local non-profit that helped women fleeing domestic and financial abuse. The pay was a fraction of what I used to make, but for the first time in years, my work felt meaningful. I started going to therapy. I talked about the anger, the grief, and the profound sense of shame I felt for having been so blind. My therapist helped me understand that I wasn't stupid, I was trusting, and that Mark's and Jessica's betrayal was a reflection of their character, not a deficiency in mine. I started to rebuild my life, not based on a blueprint, but on what felt right, day by day. I adopted a dog from a local shelter, a scruffy terrier mix I named Phoenix. His goofy, unconditional love was a balm to my wounded soul. I reconnected with old friends, the ones who had stuck by me through the worst of it. I learned to laugh again. About a year after the settlement, I was in a small independent bookstore, one of my new favourite haunts. I was reaching for a book on a high shelf when a man next to me reached for the same one. "Sorry," he said, smiling. He had kind eyes. "You can have it." "I can wait." "It's okay," I said, my own smile feeling rusty, unused. "I'm in no hurry." His name was Alex. He was an architect. We started talking about books, then about architecture, then about life. He asked me out for coffee. The old me, the pre-betrayal Chloe, would have immediately calculated the potential risks and rewards. The new me just said, "I'd like that." Our relationship developed slowly, cautiously. I was terrified of being vulnerable again. One evening, after we had been dating for a few months, he asked me about my past. I told him everything. I laid out the ugly, painful story, expecting him to run. He just listened. When I was done, he took my hand. "Thank you for telling me," he said softly. "That sounds like it was hell. I'm so sorry you went through that. But I'm not him." It was that simple, that profound. He didn't try to fix me. He didn't pity me. He just saw me. 5 years after that disastrous anniversary party, my life is unrecognizable, and I am so profoundly grateful for it. I never saw a significant amount of the settlement money. Mark fled the state to avoid his creditors, and I heard through the grapevine, was living a transient life, his charm having finally run out of currency. Jessica sent me a long, rambling letter of apology a few years ago. I read it, and then I threw it away. I couldn't find it in my heart to forgive her, but I did find it in myself to let go of the anger. She was a ghost from a life that no longer belonged to me. I went back to school and got a certificate in nonprofit management. I now run the shelter where I used to volunteer. Every day, I use my financial skills to help women untangle themselves from situations like the one I escaped. I show them how to build a new life, brick by brick. My work is my purpose. Alex and I live together in a small but light-filled apartment that we renovated ourselves. It's not the grand house I once designed, but it's a home, a real one. There are no locked rooms here. Our life is an open book. We talk about everything, especially the hard things. Love, I've learned, isn't about grand gestures and perfect performances. It's about the quiet, steady work of showing up for each other, honestly and completely. Sometimes, I think about that 10th anniversary gift, the diamonds in the trash, the stack of papers that blew up my world. In a twisted way, it was the most valuable gift I ever received. It was the truth. It forced me to see that the perfect life I had so carefully planned was a gilded cage. I was so busy managing the blueprint that I never stopped to ask if the foundation was real. The betrayal taught me the hardest and most important lesson. The only life worth living is an authentic one, and the only person you can truly build your foundation on is yourself. My old life is gone, burned to the ground, but from the ashes, something new and far more beautiful has grown. Something strong, something real, something that is, finally and completely, my own.